A lot of you have ignored your faith for a long time in the church. A lot of you young people who have just graduated Christian schools and public schools and home schools, you've ignored your faith as well. And some of you parents have ignored their faith. You have assumed too much. And the reason that I know this is because I meet with many of you and I meet with your children and I talk to them about the gospel and they can't answer any of the questions. Many of you can't answer the questions. Many of you have assumed too much. You've assumed that since you sat in church and since we have sat in church all of our lives, that we kind of by osmosis learn it. And we haven't learned it. And our faith is weak. And when it's challenged and when we're bombarded with the culture and with what's out there, we fold really fast. And a lot of your kids will fold very fast. It's sad, statistically speaking, if some of you have been to these graduations recently, and even in the Christian school graduations, many of those kids will fall away from the faith in about 3 months. That's scientific fact. We can cover our eyes all we want, and the reason why is because we've assumed too much. And we've assumed too much by saying things like this. Well, when we're challenged with our faith, we say, well, that's what I've always grown up with, so I'm just going to stick to it. And we don't examine the claims that are out there against our faith and try to defend the faith. Because we have a weak faith. And the problem is, brothers, sisters, Stones Throw Church, young people, parents, single people, divorced people, married people, everybody sitting here this morning who claims Jesus, the problem is this, is the words, that's what I've grown up with, don't work anymore. They don't work. And so I'm challenging you this morning to examine your faith. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? What is faith? I looked it up in the dictionary, the be end and end all, the inerrant, infallible dictionary. And this is what they say in the dictionary. Faith is belief or trust in something or someone. Now that sounds okay, right? What that definition, yeah, that sounds like Christian faith. Belief in something, the gospel, belief in someone, Jesus Christ. That we're okay with that, but they've added something into the dictionary when it comes to faith. Here's what they've added, and I quote, especially without logical proof. There are some key words in there that can destroy many of your idea of faith and who Jesus is. Belief in someone or something, especially without any big word, logical proof. And so when your kids go to college and when you go to college or when you're in the workplace and people begin spouting what is called logic and facts, and some of them are good facts and science, we fold because we think that faith is defined by this definition. Logical, I looked that word up as well. It's fact-based. It's empirical. Let me explain that word, empirical. Empirical is proof that you can touch, that you can feel, that you can see. Today, we will take communion. You will touch the bread. You will taste the bread. You will taste the cup. You will see other people doing it. So that is empirical proof that we are taking communion and that this is bread. When you taste it, you'll say, this is bread. This tastes like bread. That's proof. That's empirical proof. And what many hinge their lives on today is empirical proof. In order for something to be true, we must see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, observe it ourselves. And if we can do those things, then it must be logical, it must be reasonable. I want to put this definition of reason and logic to an empirical test. You guys following me? And it involves all of you. How many of you have ever been to Africa? Raise your hands. It's not a rhetorical question. All right? How many of you have not been to Africa? Raise your hands. How many of you, put your hands down, believe that Africa exists? All right, you can see the problem here. You've never seen Africa. Oh, but I've seen it on pictures and video camera. Yes, but were they really in Africa? If a tree falls in the forest, does it really make a sound if nobody's there to hear it? You've seen it, you've read about it in textbooks, but you've never been there. Have you ever tasted it? Have you ever smelled it? Have you ever seen it? Or are you trusting someone else to make that decision for you? How many of you have ever met Abraham Lincoln? How many of you believe Abraham Lincoln existed? Some of you are kooky, didn't raise your hands. All right, why do you believe it? Because somebody told you. Because we have pictures of him. Because somebody said, that's Abraham Lincoln. So that requires a certain amount of faith, doesn't it? A certain amount of, I don't have the empirical evidence. I didn't see him with my own eyes. I didn't touch him with my hands. I didn't hear him speak the Gettysburg Address, but I believe those things happened. That's faith. You see, everybody lives on faith. Everybody. Even the most logical, reasonable person, the most scientific atheist. And by the way, those things aren't synonymous. Even the most scientific, fact-based person must eventually come to a point of faith in their life with something. Whether it be God, whether it be the facts that they believe or the theories that they hold to. Everybody lives by faith. Everything we say, everything we do, everything requires faith. Let me give you an example. The other day, I rode on my first group bike ride with a bunch of guys from this church. That takes a little bit of faith, especially when you're all on your bicycles and you're going down a hill at 30 miles an hour. It takes a little bit of faith when you're just 6 or 7 inches off the tire of another man. It takes a lot of faith in who? In him. It takes faith in the bike manufacturer. It takes faith in the road. It takes faith in the signals that they make because they tell you, well, there's something up here, there's something over there. It takes faith in the manufacturers of your helmet, for sure. It takes faith. It takes faith for you to put your kids to bed at night, doesn't it? Those of you who have kids know what I'm talking about. It takes faith. You're leaving them for 8 hours by themselves, hoping that they will make it through the night. It's based on faith. It's based on reasonable faith. It's based on factual faith. It takes faith to get into a car. It takes faith to take a prescription from the drugstore. It takes faith to listen to a doctor. It takes faith. Everything that we say, everything that we do takes faith. No one in this world only believes, that key word only, believes that which they have experienced. No one. There are things that you believe that you have not experienced firsthand. Faith is looking at the facts, looking at the evidence, and choosing to believe whether it's choosing to believe that those facts and that evidence that it points to and the claims that it's making, whether or not you have firsthand experience. That's what faith is. So let me apply that to the gospel. How many of you walked the earth when Jesus walked the earth? No one. What do we believe in? We believe in the testimony of people who walked with Jesus. We believe in the testimony of the church. We believe in what the Bible is saying. At some point, just like when you ride your bicycle, when you go to the doctor, no matter what you do, when you sit in history class or with your professor, no matter what you're doing, you have some kind of faith. And you're taking a look at the evidence. You're taking a look at what people said about Jesus. You're taking a look at how he has changed the world. And you're saying, I believe that. It's not just something where you say, well, it's what I've always grown up with. It's what I sang about in church. It's what my parents made me do. It's what my Christian school taught me. That's not faith at all. Faith is you taking a look at the facts, you reading the scriptures, you coming face to face with the claims that the disciples make about Jesus, that Jesus makes about himself, that God makes about himself in this word and saying, I either believe that or I don't. Whether or not I experienced it firsthand matters not. I either believe it or I don't.